In today's podcast, when you're looking to buy an existing business, you need to conduct due diligence, and that includes various things. So in today's podcast, we're going to look at 7 generic steps you need to consider when buying an existing business. Welcome to the Franchise and Acquisition Show. My name is Lester, and today on the podcast, we're going to look at the 7 generic things you need to look at when looking to buy an existing business. Now, the first thing, obviously, we need to look at is the financials. Now, the longer the period that those financials are recorded over, the better. So the business might have been in business for 5 years, but they only have access to 6 months financials because they feel that 6 months is a good indication of the health of the business. Insist on getting the full term or at least 2 years, because if you only have 6 months, you can't compare how August performed to August last year, and that will give you an indication of year-on-year growth. The last 6 months might have been a good growth spurt because of external factors within the business environment, which is something we'll unpack and discuss. But when you're looking to consult the financials of the business, insist on the full time period in which the business has been operational. In some cases, business owners that are selling the business might say that they only have access to the last 6 months or to the last year. Get them to give you the bank statements, even if you have to sign a non-disclosure, because this is sensitive and confidential information, but insist on getting as much information around the financials as quickly as possible. Now, what about the financials do we need to look at? Now, there are 3 main areas that we will look at. The first one is the income statement, and the income statement must be linked to the bank statements. It must be linked to a POS system, which is a point of sale system. So if they do manage, or if they deal with cash, the POS system must record all of those transactions, not just the bank transactions. This financials must be externally audited if you are buying a business that exceeds 1.5 million rand. And this is just a figure that I put in my head to be comfortable with. Lower than that, the risk is not as high, and higher than that obviously means that you're going into a higher risk category. So you need to insist on externally audited financial statements, and this needs to be verified by an attorney with the attorney's details. So if it is a chancer that is just trying his luck and is trying to sell a business that might not be lucrative, but the numbers have been inflated, if you ask for all of this information, it might be a strong deterrent for them to actually say, listen, this is a good business, you need to buy this business and you need to pay within a certain time period. Okay, so an income statement will show you what the profit or loss is of the organization, but more importantly, it will also show you what the margin between the two is. So you'll have your income coming in, you'll minus that by your fixed costs, your variable costs, and you need to break it down line by line. So it needs to be detailed financials, not just the categories or the overarching topic in terms of what it covers. When you see a category under your expenses, salary, and you see an amount of 50,000, you need to ask for a breakdown of what that 50,000 is. How much person, or how much does person X get, how much does person Y get, and that is all important information. The second one you would have to look at under the financials would be your cash flow analysis. Now, the company might be recording profit, but if the customers are not paying COD, which is cash on delivery, and they're paying 30 days later, that obviously has consequences from a cash flow perspective. You also need to see what the opening balances and what the closing balances are, so you can have an accumulated understanding of what the financials are telling you. Now, it is important to understand which of these customers are paying on 30-day or 60-day or 90-day terms, and which of them are paying cash, and what the consequences or repercussions are for the business. In some cases, you might have to carry that client, and that means you might have to get a credit facility. And if that credit facility is now costing you, you need to understand that that has a significant impact on your margin at the end of the financial month or at the end of the financial year. Secondly, those that are paying on 30-day, 60-day, or 90-day terms, are they good debtors? Are they paying on time? And if they're not paying on time and you have to go into an extended credit facility, what is the interest that is being charged to you, and are you charging that interest over to your customer? So those are all not only additional expenses that you'll have to factor in, but there's also additional admin fees that you would have to factor in there as well. The other important thing is the income statement might show that the company is making a profit because the transaction is recorded, but the cash flow statement only records that transaction once the money is in the account. And what that means is you might have a beautiful income statement that shows that the company, including all its cash collectibles or cash received or receivables, in other words, debtors, it might show that there's 5 million rand, but if you're looking at the actual bank account, it might only show 1.5 million. So where's the other 3.5? It is still out there in the form of your debtors, and if they are not paying you on time, what is the significant impact on that? And then the third thing you need to look at is a balance sheet. Now, a balance sheet is a combination of everything the company owns and everything the company owes. Now, this obviously impacts the value of the organization as well, because if there are assets in excess to the value of 2 million or 5 million rand, you need to also understand what is the lifespan, at what point does that get depreciated, and at what point does that get written off. Okay, so that is just a very genetic overarching view of what the financials would be telling you with regard to this organization. If they're looking at selling this company for 5 billion rand, the assets alone might be worth 5 billion, and then you have contracts in place, and you can see based on the financials, the company's making an extra 1.5 billion rand per annum in terms of profit, then it might be a good business. But of course, if you don't have some of these bases that then comes in, then you won't really know what number to base it against. You won't know if the number that they are asking for is a good number, or if it is a bad number, or if it's just someone that is taking a chance. Okay, that is the first thing you look at when you're conducting a due diligence when buying an existing business. The second thing you need to look at is, are there contracts in place with clients? Now, when there's a contract in place, there is a contractual agreement and a binding agreement that says we are buying X amount from you, or we are spending X amount with you every single month. And you can go back to the financials and you can actually see this is the time frame in which we have made use of this service. This is the time frame which the customer has bought from us, and they spend X amount of money, and this is also contributed to the value of the sale. The third thing we look at is your competitors. Now, how do you measure up against your competitors in terms of price? How do you measure up in terms of quality? And what do they offer that you don't? What do you offer that they don't? What is your unique selling proposition? And when there are certain advances that your competitors has made that you might not have made as yet, whether it's AI, whether it is tech, how are you looking at breaching that potential gap that might occur in the very near future? So those are some competitors that you need to understand, and you need to understand how you measure up against them. The fourth thing you'd look at is the external factors that could affect your business. Now, external factors, the podcast we launched on the Business Fundamental Show not too long ago is called the PESTEC Show, and PESTEC stands for political factors, economic factors, socio-economic factors, technological factors, environmental factors, and climatic factors. So what happens in each of these categories that affect these businesses that you might be buying? So are there changes in the political landscape that might affect the organization? Is there a shuffle, or is there a cabinet shuffle among the ministers, and the one minister might have had a passion for this project that you would have made money from in this business, and now that there's a new minister in place, he has a different focus and he wants to do something else with those monies that have now been allocated. That could affect your business, in some cases positively, in other cases negatively. Economic factors: what happens if there's a change in interest rate? What happens if there's socio-economic changes? So all of these are external factors that you have very little control over. The only thing you can do is control how you would either ride the wave if it's a positive change, or how you would take the hit if it is a negative change. The fifth thing you need to understand is who are the key staff members, including the business owner that is selling, and the relationship with the existing client. So we bought a coffee shop a few years ago, 2018 I think it was, and the owner of this business had a very good relationship with all of the customers that came in day in, day out. And when they sold the business over to me, I never had that same relationship. So naturally, we lost some customers in the process. So you need to understand, especially in service-based businesses, what is the relationship with the business owners? What is the relationship with the key staff members? And if you come on board and you buy the business, are those key staff members staying behind? Those are important questions you need to ask. And then question number 6, you need to understand the customer concentration. So if 70% of your revenue comes from one client, and that client decides they're going to leave, and they are either going to buy from somebody else, or they're going to buy from the person that is selling because they might have interest in opening their own business, which is another thing you'd have to consider as well. Is there restraint of trade? Is there non-compete clause in place? So customer concentration, if you have one big fish that is paying 70% of your bills, you need to understand that if you come on board, is there contractual agreements in place that will retain this customer for another 2 years? And then question number 7, this is obviously industry related, so you'd have to do additional research in terms of, your clientele, the demographics, your physical location based on where the store might be, if it's a brick and mortar store, and if there are any upcoming developments in that geographical location that might reroute customers and make it slightly inconvenient for them. These are the generic factors you need to understand when buying an existing business. Now, keep in mind, these are generic, and I keep saying that over and over. In some cases, you need specialized research, like reviewing a franchise agreement, or whether it's bringing in a geologist because you're thinking of buying a mine in the Democratic Republic of Congo. There are obviously existential circumstances where you need to bring in or research more detail and try to understand, where the business is, why they are selling, understand the psychological components, the fiscal components, and everything else with regard to that organization. So again, if you got value from this podcast, please consider becoming a member of the Corp community, where you can have access to all of this content free of charge. If you are listening on YouTube, please consider liking and subscribing, and maybe sharing the link to some of your friends that are in business, or thinking of starting a business, or thinking of buying an existing business as well. So that is it for today. I'll be back next week, same time, same place. Until then, goodbye and God bless.